Hello everyone. Today we'll be introducing Dr. Roberta Lee in regards to SuperStress, but Katya and I thought this would be a great opportunity since it's finals week to get everybody to do a little bit of fun, to de-stress slightly. So computers away and everybody stand up.
This is being filmed.
Maybe you can stretch a little bit. Shake your neck and just clear your throat. And take some deep breaths. Because now we would like to sing a little song together.
I see now.
Do us hang out of tune, roots stand up and walk out on me. Lend me your ears and I'll sing you a song, and I'll try not to sing out of key. Oh, if I will help from my friends. If I will help from my friends. If I will help from my friends. And you can rock. What do when our love is away, as if worry used to be alone? Will I feel by the end of the day, are you sad because you're on your own?
You've been waiting.
Have a little help from my friends. Just have a little help from my friends. You need anybody. I need somebody to love. Could it be anybody? I want somebody to love. You believe in love at first sight. With bad hands all the time. What do you see when you turn out the light? I can't tell you, but I know it's mine.
You should sing.
I get high with a little help from my friends. I get high with a little help from my friends. I get high with a little help from my friends. Need anybody? Just want someone to love. Need anybody? Want somebody to love. Get high with a little help from my friends. Get high with a little help from my friends. Get high with a little help from my friends. Get high with a little help from my friends.
We'll move on to our quick introduction, and then we'll
Okay, Roberta Lee is Vice Chair of the Department of Integrative Medicine, Director of Continuing Medical Education, and Co-Director of the Fellowship in Integrative Medicine at Beth Israel's Continuum Center for Health and Healing at Beth Israel Medical Center in New York City.
And Dr. Lee attended George Washington University Medical School. Following her completion of her residency in internal medicine, she served as a U.S. Public Health Service physician in Micronesia for 5 years. For the past 10 years, she has traveled back to Micronesia as an ethnomedical specialist in an interdisciplinary team of biologists, ethnobotanists, ecologists, and conservationists studying the cross-section of cultural and botanical influences on health, healing, and the promotion of wellness in chronic disease.
And she is also the author of the book SuperStress Solution. So we are really proud to have you here for this class, and a really warm welcome. Sure.
nice to be here, and I'm so tempted to bring my guitar and sing a lecture to you after that. So today what we're going to do is really focus on defining what superstress is from stress, because it's a word we've known forever in our language, and understand the implications on our health and strategies for coping. I think that's probably the most important thing about today's lecture. And some things that you can do to support your wellness rather than succumb to its ravages. If you look at some of the surveys by the American Psychological Association, you see that, you know, the predominance of perception of stress is that people manage their stress well. But if you start drilling down into the symptoms that people are going to see their doctors for, they're trying to manage irritability, fatigue, headaches, insomnia, decreased sex drive, irritable bowel syndrome, which, you know, is constipation and diarrhea, and all these things you need medicines for. And what's so interesting from my vantage point is that the slide set is moving on its own, and that if, you know, when you start talking to people, they don't put two and two together. That the physical issues that they're dealing with are really stress related. Now, why is that? Well, we've adopted to the pace of our lives and to the things that are triggers for stress, right? And I think the medical community has communicated very effectively to its patients and to ourselves as doctors, my profession, that all health can be defined in a very materialistic manner. So, what are we going to do when we feel off? We're going to go, if we go to the healthcare practitioner, we want to see if our thyroid isn't, you know, balanced, or if we have cancer, or, you know, something is off. I guess what I'm trying to suggest is that things of the mind, the more intangible aspects that drive the emotion of stress, are somewhat subconscious and sort of ignored by us because they're not so physical. They're not so easy to classify in the doctor's world, in the clinical world. And this is just a graph that you can't read very well to show all the symptoms and what is the most common, and basically the things that I just sort of ran off to in that list: irritability, loss of sex drive. Those are the most prevalent things. On the emotional side, it's usually anxiety, depression, emotional lability, meaning you're all over the place with emotions. Is there any way to turn off this timer? Is that how we do it?
There should be a pause on the screen.
Oh, that might be it.
Yeah, okay.
Should we get the lights?
So it can, you know, everybody copes a little bit differently. It can be a physical trigger, can be a physical manifestation, or it can be a more mood-oriented manifestation. Women seem to react in a much more somatic or physical way than psychological, with sleeping issues, overeating, undereating, and, you know, use of prescriptive medications. But I don't think that's unique to women. I think that's just America. You look at the surveys in stress, you know, looking at gender differences over the last couple of years with all the financial pressures and drops, it looks like women have really borne the brunt of stress much more palpably, and a lot of the thinking behind that is because they have different roles. You know, they're managing homes and they're managing high-powered careers, or they have 3 jobs and they're managing the family, etc. So, why is this so powerful? Well, we're just really hardwired to have this response. I mean, since we were evolved as humans, we've had it. It's an evolutionary adaptive response to stay alive. And the stress that I'm speaking to is really a way for us as an animal, if you will, to either fly or fight. It's a neurological response that takes about 1/10 of a second or less. So you're not even thinking. So when they had that marathon in Boston and that bomb explosion went off, and you look at the video, you'll notice that there's like a very brief pause, and then there's a scurry around of everything. Not even at the pace of what you would do when you were perceiving the fact that there's an explosion. And that's part of that automatic response to flee. And it's managed by the center of our of this little area the size of a walnut in the center of our brain known as the limbic area. Now, what's so interesting about this is that that's the area where fear and very traumatic emotion is also stored. It's not stored as a thought. It's stored in a different way by the brain. And it's also the area where hormones are managed, particularly germane to females. You know, women in a high emotional state, if they're in their childbearing years, will often lose their periods. Women in menopausal or perimenopausal time frames will often begin to exhibit signs of menopause when they're not really in menopause, because the gyrations of the hormones are being altered by the physiological response of the stress. And this gets very interesting. But, you know, the bottom line is we've got to survive. And here's this cat, you know, it's going by all those German Shepherds, and, you know, it's having a stress response. Now, everybody's controlled, but I think the German Shepherds are also having a stress response, and they're controlling themselves. So it's a perception, an action, and then it's a system-wide release of all these molecules that basically send messages to every organ and every cellular system in your body. So from that little walnut area, the limbic area, down goes the message to the adrenal glands, and then out comes all the stress hormones, cortisol, epinephrine, norepinephrine, creating what you know really well. Your heart will increase in its rate. You might sweat. You'll have a sudden rush of strength. Your digestion will slow down. And your pupils become dilated. Your vision gets actually better. But that's only an adaptive response that the body's really used to coping with for minutes, not hours, and certainly not day after day, and certainly not year after year. So, what I'm suggesting to you is that because we're in a different environment now with our lifestyle, you know, we have things that access our attention 24/7, because we have different expectations for ourselves, and maybe because our values might be different and we're multitasking, the culmination of that response in our bodies at a conscious and subconscious level, in combination with a hectic lifestyle, really equates into a whole different animal in the body, and actually is a welcome mat for chronic disease. And, you know, it sounds really great, but I'm going to talk about some genetics that actually really show that later on, and we won't go into it really deeply, but just to drive home that it's real, you know, it's really material, and really present in your body. So what's the difference between stress and super stress, this kind of chronic, relentless effect that I'm talking about? Well, the clues are that stress is compounded. In other words, it's not, you know, your life is complicated and you're multitasking, and it's creating a lot of havoc. You don't feel like you're in control. You know, it's running you. When you think about the time you spend 24/7 and how you like it or don't, you can't get a hold of the joy in your life anymore. The sparkle's gone. You're kind of like on autopilot and you're calling it in, as they say. And anxious is the new normal. So it doesn't necessarily have to be that you feel anxious, but like you're waking up in the middle of the night now and you can't figure out why. I see that all the time. Where does it tend to fall out in your body? Well, in your nervous system, in your GI tract, in your hormonal system, and in your immune system. And on the handout that I gave you,
Does everyone have a handout?
did I give the?
Did I give us the one where they printed it all out?
Oh, there it is. Yeah, we can hand it up. What I did was I put the editorial, which I think most of you actually read because Mary put it on the website. But in there, I put this graph or this slide, and I put in parentheses with the key target organs some of the things that tend to be the signs or clinical symptoms that I would see.
Oh my God, who was mine? I'm so sorry.
And I'm not going to go into them, but it's just like I was saying at the beginning, you know, memory issues, sex drive issues, diarrhea, constipation issues, hot flashes when you're not supposed to be getting them, more colds when you probably wouldn't expect yourself to be quite so vulnerable. And the other things that happen, because this is happening all the time, this response, is that inflammatory signals and management of sugars in your body with insulin start to get really altered. This is really, really terrible because we are now finding in science that inflammatory signaling is one of the key ways that cancers signal their cells to start multiplying. So when I say it's a welcome mat for disease, I'm not kidding. Heart disease, one of the most influential influences on promotion of heart attacks, besides cholesterol, is the inflammation that's driven around in the body. And it's all by those molecules that increase inflammation. Increased sugar by insulin management. We now know that cancers in the body actually get worse or have growth promotion with insulin signaling, because IGF, which is a growth promoter, is stimulated by prolonged and chronic insulin release. So it's not good. Suppression of your digestive system. If your digestive system is not restoring itself from the wear and tear of the acid, and it's shutting down, the barriers against some of the bacteria that you inadvertently breathe in and ends up in your GI tract, it's not cut off by the acid in the stomach. It's not vetted by the barriers that happen with a healthy GI system. So it's a big deal. And then we get hit with all this terrible news, and we can't help it. If we're thinking, feeling human beings, we're going to react. So when we heard that news about Boston, it didn't happen to us, but we still feel it. And that has a response. So I've suggested to you that chronic diseases are related to chronic stress or superstress, and the most common ones are linked: heart disease, diabetes, asthma, autoimmune disorders, thyroid issues, cancer, irritable bowel, and so forth. With all this, our metabolism starts to really change, and it acts kind of like someone with type 2 diabetes. People start to gain weight. They start to show signs of diabetes with poor sugar management. And the fat that they deposit usually is around their waist, and it acts like, in and of itself, that particular kind of fat starts amplifying these inflammatory molecules that I was talking about. That's not good. So I suggested to you that there's some genetic information that actually ties together what happens with stress in our bodies. And Elizabeth Blackburn won the Nobel Prize in Medicine, I think in 2009, and she did studies on what's known as telomeres. These are the little end plates on genetic material, which keeps the genetic material from unraveling. Okay? And as a cell divides over its lifetime, these telomeres shorten with each division. And the body also manufactures an enzyme to keep lengthening these telomeres called telomerase. But there is a sort of planned obsolescence. Eventually, the telomerase cannot repair the telomeres enough, and that cell loses its capability to divide, and it dies. And that's a really good thing, because the longer you have mutations, the more you have the possibility of a genetic breakdown, of a mutation into a bad thing. Well, it turns out with chronic stress, this whole process is accelerated. So this phenomenon of telomeres and aging is basically as we're aging, our telomeres are shortening, and we're losing our resiliency. Okay, we're losing our elasticity in our biology. Well, it turns out that in stressed individuals, people who have emotional stress, it's the same thing. It's kind of like stepping on the gas pedal of the aging process. We are increasing. I'm going to give you some good news, okay? Not all bad news. I'm just going to drive home. It's not exactly. So if we have stress and it's chronic, you know, it accelerates this process and it mimics what we see in diabetes, cholesterol, or obesity, all these diseases. But then the good doctors wanted to find out if there was any way that this could have some kind of reversibility. So they did a study, and they actually took stressed individuals and eventually taught them a stress reduction exercise for 20 minutes for 3 months. And they measured their telomeres and their known stress response, which was shortening. Then they measured the telomeres after the study, after 3 months learning this. And they're supposed to, these people that were participating in the study were going to do the stress reduction exercise every day. And guess what? It's on the slide. The telomeres grew. They grew. That's good news. Do you know what this means?
Mm-mm.
This means that if we do things that we love, like sing, every day, it doesn't have to be for long either, but if we do them, we actually can reverse the ravages of accelerated biological aging, one of those things being stress. This is huge news for the medical community because for all of our training in my generation, there was this sort of notion that the mind and the body were inherently split, meaning we're going to tough it out and we'll be okay because our bodies can take it. But now we're seeing that isn't really so, not for everybody. For some people, because they just can, but not for everybody. So that's actually really good news for us. So in essence, unchecked, the stress has a snowball effect on our bodies. And the answer is really this thing that I practice called integrative medicine, which is taking what we always know in regular science and amplifying our ability to manage our wellness by really honing in on these little eggs that I'm just talking about in this Venn diagram of lifestyle management. Diet, exercise, stress reduction. You know, stress reduction isn't breathing and meditation. It's singing, it's dancing, it's Zumba, it's hanging out with your friends with coffee. You know, it doesn't have to be so rigid. And similarly with exercise, it's not going to the gym. It's just being active. Go rake some leaves or, you know, run around the park, or you get the idea. But it's part of the management that integrative medicine uses. Why? It's cheap. People can do it on their own. It works with your biology. You know, it's kind of in sync with your evolutionary strategy of how human biology works well. And then diet, which we'll go into in a little bit. So, the solution is really coping in a multimodal way. And I in the book, I suggest that there's different ways people manifest super stress because they are different. People have different cultural experiences. They, you know, have different perceptions about how things are happening to them. Some people get burned out. Some people become very controlling and focused on a goal. Other people just act out and they get angry. Some really get emotional lability. They can't concentrate, and so forth. And it's nice to typify it so that people can kind of pick. The reason why I did this for the book is that the solutions, the things that would help them ground again, would be different for these different types. There's a test that I put together to let people kind of see where they were, and you can go on the website, it's on your handout, and try it. The cure is really simple: removing things that are toxic, you know, like too many stimulants, too many cups of coffee, cigarettes, you know, doing things that you enjoy, which we talked about, and consciously living a lifestyle that fosters healthy choices. Everyone wonders, well, what are the foods? What are the foods? Well, it's really simple. Something like the Mediterranean diet, you know, less red meat, more olive oil, a lot of vegetables, not too many refined carbs, a little wine, not too much, you know, and so forth. Very easy, very anti-inflammatory. Omega-3 fatty acids, which we get from oily fish or flax seeds if you're a vegetarian, very useful. You want to minimize eating the fish that are the largest fish because they have the highest mercury. You want to protect your digestive system, so you want to have in your diet cultured foods like yogurts with live acidophilus, or you can take a probiotic if you want to be a little bit more diet supplement oriented. You want to have a lot of fiber from foods because they feed your gut. You know, sometimes people are multivitamin types, so here's the list. You know, vitamin C, E, zinc, selenium, B complex, magnesium, and folic acid. A typical multivitamin, you can find all these things together. Or a great diet with tons of fruits and vegetables with different colors of the fruits, you'll get most of this stuff in there. Everyone wonders what's the amount of probiotics that you need, and you know, it's 10 billion organisms. There are things that are higher nutritive value, spices like turmeric, ginger, rosemary and sage, oils like olive oil, green tea, and they're special mood foods, if we will. These are foods that are high in choline. Choline is an amino acid that enhances your memory, because invariably some people, when they're super stressed or multitasking too much, their memory gets shot. So you want to give it some nutrition that can heighten that. You know, what would life be without some treats, right? So I like to deliver good news, and I'm here to say that dark chocolate, 70% or more, has a very high antioxidant value, and I usually say for a treat, not for a main food group in your daily diet. Maybe, you know, like about a third of a bar can be useful to you. And then, you know, if you're a conscious consumer, maybe get, you know, fair trade chocolate. Sleep. And chronically you're deprived from sleep, so rather than memorizing all these numbers, I generally say to people, sleep enough to get refreshed. In other words, when you wake up. It has a lot of great physical influence on reversing the ravages of stress. And then we talked about physical activity. There's all sorts of ways to do it. Aromatherapy is an integrative or alternative therapy that uses essential oils to access that same area that I pointed out in my slides, which mediates the stress response. And what's so interesting is, for us, there it is, going right into that olfactory bubble. You do not have to detect consciously the scent of the essential oil to enact a physiological response. Isn't that interesting? There's just some kind of neural response that happens. If you just dispense a little bit of that, a droplet of oil into the air, to achieve a variety of things. You know, all these essential oils have different kinds of effects, but lavender is one that, you know, most people know that is relaxing. You know, some people don't like the smell of lavender, so you can dial down the amount that you're dispensing so they can't detect it, and it can still have an effect. Okay. There are other scents, ylang ylang, rosemary also enhances the relaxation response. A very interesting study that showed that meditation for 12 minutes actually can reverse something, you know, some of the ravages of Alzheimer's, but equally as effective in enhancing the relaxation response and sort of reversing that aging process that we were talking about genetically. If you can't, if your nervous system is so overloaded that you can't know that you're relaxing, there's all sorts of aids. There are things called biodots, but I actually brought some biodots, and we can put them on ourselves. And you can, it's kind of like a mood ring. You can watch the color of your vasodilation in your hands, and the more relaxed you are, the warmer your hands are. Or you can use things that you can buy on Amazon or the internet that monitors your breathing and cues you and then gives you a feedback. These are not really expensive things to let you know that you're in that zone. I often use it with patients. Of course, there's always meditation. There's breath work and the singing. You know, you're using the breath and the diaphragm to access the relaxation response from breath work. And you know, how many of you know how to meditate or have any semblance? Okay, so most of you. You know, I often will, for those who don't, I often will suggest that they just sit back and actually enhance their consciousness by putting their hands on their chest and one on their belly, and just imagining that they're sitting under a tree or in a relaxed space and breathing naturally, with the objective of breathing more and more with the belly. Because usually when we're on the run, we're breathing with our chest. And that can be the meditation. So, we've sort of gone through everything that I can think of. Everything that we talked about is on that list, I think, to some degree, not quite to the detail. But I think now we can open up the session, because I think I was only supposed to talk for 30 minutes, right, Mary?
Well, this has all been great.
Yeah.
In the last.
And, talk about or ask more questions, or I can flesh things out. You can turn the light on.
Okay.
Dr. Lee, you spoke about several different ways to cope with stress. Is there anything particular that you want to give to us during our finals week?
Well, on that handout that I gave you, I did.
Oh, that's great.
I put the strategies for SuperStress. Get enough sleep to feel refreshed. Remove your BlackBerry or whatever it is you communicate on out of your bedroom. How many of you guys charge those little guys right next to your bed? Okay. It's nice that you do because you're connected, but it's also the undoing of your relaxation response for several reasons. One is at a subliminal level, you know it's there, and when you get up in the middle of the night, you're going to want to check it maybe. Two is that it emits light, and the light changes the melatonin, the pacemaker for your sleep, and is very important in your health management. And so it's disrupting a cycle. You need that darkness, and you need to know that you can have deep sleep. So my suggestion is making rules for living in the 21st century, and charge them out of where you're sleeping, and know that you're going to turn it off at a reasonable hour, like 10, 11. You could be 12 or 1, and you're going to turn it on at 6 or 5. In other words, get away from it.
Robbie?
Yeah.
What about, I live on Broad, my bedroom overlooks Broadway. There's no way for it to be dark. Would you recommend a mask?
A mask or, shades that block out the light. They've shown that women that work in night shifts have higher rates of breast cancer. So it's a big deal, this light, but it's also a big deal for relaxation. So I think you can do it a number of ways. You can put something over your eyes. That's the easiest. But I think blocking out with heavier curtains is another way to do it. Yeah. Let's see, what else did I put in there? Take a 5-minute break in the middle of the day. This is a big deal. It breaks the cycle of your body to want to release those stress hormones. And when you have a 5-minute break, don't get on the computer. Just have a cup of tea or go outside the building and just walk around. Okay, even for 3 minutes. The idea is that you're repacing your nervous system. Okay? And you'll have time to do that, believe me, even with your dead bodies. And then physical activity. It doesn't have to be every day. It doesn't have to be really long. It could be just 15 minutes. It could be at home. It doesn't have to be in the gym. Supplements, I think fish oil, or flaxseed oil, if you're a vegetarian, is very good. I would take that. I'd take a multivitamin. I'd take some magnesium, somewhere between 50 to 250 milligrams a day. I'd take D3, about 2,000 international units a day. It protects your immune system. The magnesium is an enhancement of relaxation. B12, somewhere between 400 and 1,000 micrograms a day. These are all things you can find in Whole Foods or any health food store. And these particular supplements are things that either support your brain, support your immune system, or support health of your cellular processes as your pace is accelerated under a stress response. okay? Diet, Mediterranean diet, the superfoods, spices, try to choose foods with lots of spice. Stay away from the sugars because they're going to detract. They're going to overutilize the vitamin stores in your body. They're going to increase inflammation, those sugary things. And then just make sure to stay connected to people. So that's sort of like the 5-minute elevator pitch kind of thing. Yes.
You mentioned making sure to sleep in a dark room, and about being sensitive to light in your surroundings. What about noise?
Noise is another one. Again, that one is much more dependent on the individual. Some people can somehow survive with the noise and they're disengaged from it, or others are really agitated by it. And I think strategies for managing it. White noise, having some sort of this constant low-level noise so that your consciousness is not just hearing what's outside, or earplugs, or music.
So you can get those little ear things like she has in her.
Yes.
Get rid of ear tabs.
Be careful with earplugs though, to not like I can't sleep without earplugs and stay on the sleep.
Hello.
Yeah.
Yes.
My question is, what has been your I'm totally a subscriber to integrative medicine. What has been your experience at, a traditional Western medical establishment with your ideas about more holistic medicine that includes a lot of different modalities and, dealing with insurance and, entrenched systems of Western medicine?
Well, I would give you a different answer 15 years ago. I'm actually, our clinic, which has 70 employees and is on 28th and 5th Avenue, is part of Beth Israel Medical Center, and we take insurance. Now, not all of our people that deliver services take insurance. We have acupuncturists that don't take insurance, but we have nutritionists, we have mind-body specialists, chiropractors, podiatrists, heart doctors, and we're delivering primary care. So we're delivering general care. This is mainstream, everyday care for people, and I would say that's pretty high access. We have about 3,600 patient visits every month.
And
there are in the medical institutions across the country, about half of the medical schools have deans who have signed on in a national consortium to implement the curriculum of integrative medicine in medical school. That's already happened. So that means half of the schools have more information to doctors about diet, some information about how acupuncture and botanicals can be managed in a primary care modern day setting for non-believers, for non-believing doctors. Of course, a strategy such as this is always received with mixed responses in an academic community, as it always has been in science. When you have a movement, there's contention, but that's okay. I think what's wonderful for us is that as time has gone by, and this movement is now probably about 15 years old, there's been more and more research in different domains, either botanicals or acupuncture, showing benefit for a variety of things like pain, nausea, and chemotherapy. So it's varied.
I and my siblings were trying to get our mother to exercise because it was a major component in getting her to get well. And she complied, but she didn't like it, and it actually created stress for her because she didn't want to do what the doctor said she had to do. And so we started asking, well, what does she like to do? Well, in fact, she doesn't like going down the street walking, and we're walking with her, but she really likes to garden. So if I ask her, would you like to go to the botanical garden? She'll say yes, and we will walk blocks and blocks, but we don't call it walking or exercise it, we call it going to the garden. So now she's getting the physiological benefits, but she's also enjoying the experience. And that was a big...
I think it's a wonderful point that we can't emphasize enough is really building lifestyle things that people like, personally like and relate to. And I think that's what we try to do in my world. But I think you just shared the best example. Thank you. Yes.
Have you come across studies in your work about kind of urban versus rural stress based on kind of everyday access to nature and
Well, I've seen it firsthand in my ethnobotanical work. In fact, I spent 10 years working here and spending a month traveling back to the Pacific Islands, near Guam. And of course, the pace of life was different. But also there were a younger generation adopting to Western lifestyle. So in that triangulation of traveling back and seeing these two generations there and things here, I was able to see how cultures interpret values about life and culture differently and how it impacts on stress. So for the islanders, they're not as consumed with their careers per se. I mean, they're consumed with their careers, but not like New Yorkers. Like New Yorkers, I mean, the people that generally walk in my office, I have a whole group of people who know to come because they're stressed and they want to figure out how to manage it. But if you ask that person here on the island of New York, do you know how to relax? You wouldn't believe how many people tell me they do not know how to relax. Whereas in the islands, there's already this built-in thing of, it's time to go fishing. There's time to have family gatherings every week. There's a different point of balance, and I think it manufactures a higher or lesser degree of stress. And I think if you travel around and observe, you'll see the same thing as I observed.
when we started school, a lot of our class moved to New York, a few days even before starting school. So there was a lot of kind of big stress of the change in geography and the feeling of the New York buzz all around you all the time.
And I'm not a New Yorker, but I'm a transplant from San Francisco. It's true. The environment here is a lot more stimulating, but I think part of the message of the SuperStress book was, yeah, it's here, but if you are aware, you can find anchors in your lifestyle, little nuggets and anchors like we talked about, the 5-minute break, the physical activity to reverse that sense of you're being encroached upon.
Sorry. You mentioned different therapies about how to reduce the stress, but how do you think of the art therapy? Because
art therapy? I think it's wonderful. What do I think of art therapy? Is that the question?
Yeah. How
you mean does it help with relaxation?
Mm-hmm.
Yes. I think every different activity that people find enjoyment with, whether it's formalized or not, can enhance the relaxation response. And art therapy has certainly been one that has been used, particularly with kids, to help that process. Kids have stress too. They don't necessarily verbalize it, but like kids who have experienced trauma, art therapy is often used. Yes.
Do you see an opportunity from a design perspective to possibly redesign places or objects or experiences so that they are less stressful and kind of pay more attention to that and integrate that into new things that we create and services and the way we interact?
Absolutely. If you were to take a tour virtually, which you can, I put the website on, of our center, you would see some of the architectural features. These are now old because our center is like 14 years old, 13 years old, that we've deliberately put together architecturally. We have earth tone colors, we have curves, we have less signage, We have rheostatic lighting in some of the examination rooms, music that can be turned on per examination room, open light spaces with natural materials that don't off-gas for, in the waiting rooms. We have electronic charts. We communicate with our patients via computer to manage and heighten communication. We have handouts that I could go on and on. We're moving towards redesigning our computer system to have a web portal so that patients can have access to parts of their charts and communicate with doctors, and that's just a little bit. But I think it can be so much more. I think products can be green and they can have colors that are conducive, to either heightening energy or enhancing relaxation or enhancing creativity. There's all sorts of stuff that can be done.
I have a question because this sounds really cool, and I don't know, I hate talking about money, but like, is this model, which is like, it seems like you have like efficiencies and the systems and stuff. So is it a cost-effective model? Because our healthcare system is awful right now. Like, is the model of your practice, is that something that would be scalable and could help with cost-effectiveness of the larger American healthcare system?
It's the biggest question that we're asking at this point, and we're trying to prove it. We, financing cost-effective studies to prove that point, that it's scalable and sellable, is expensive. And centers such as mine have to fundraise through. The current situation at NIH and NCAM through the government funding is very difficult and sparse. So through private donors, we have done smaller studies, clinically oriented, to try and prove that. And I can tell you that our center is a scalable model. It can break even, but I will say this, primary health care is not a profitable business. It never was in the old days when I was in an HMO. Break even is usually about the best that you can get, and part of the reason is the healthcare system is dysfunctional, it's broken. It does not encourage prevention of disease. It encourages what we call end-stage management of like getting a heart transplant or a kidney transplant, but it gives very little reimbursement for having doctors talk to patients, let's say, who are at risk for kidney disease, about the kinds of foods they should eat or the foods they should stay away from, which is very sad. Because if we flipped the reimbursement around and taught people more prevention-oriented information, we would probably be able to avoid some of these most costly technological, high-funded entities in our healthcare system, which is the problem about why primary healthcare is not profitable or difficult to make a budget-neutral system. So we have spent now 14 years tweaking the primary healthcare model, meaning we have a certain number of types of specialties which bring more income in the existing dysfunctional healthcare system, and we've managed the time that doctors use in their prevention-oriented, insurance-reimbursed visits, and we found the balance point. But scalable to other parts of the country, yes, but not easily. It's not like a McDonald's model. Different parts of the country in the United States have different healthcare needs, believe it or not, even in a primary healthcare setting, a clinical well care management. So what it takes is someone to look at those factors and answer the needs of its consumers, if you will, to the nuances of that service delivery to make it viable. But it can be. I don't know if that simply answered that enough.
It didn't. I guess I was hoping for you to say yes.
I would love to say it, but truthfully, we're right in the thick of it right now in the movement of bringing it to the table.
But you do see that this is a potential, like, intervention that obviously would have to be tweaked to specific settings, but it is a model that could potentially have like transformative impacts on, you know, some of the ills facing the system.
It definitely does have transformative effects. I mean, there's already data out there with health conditions, but you know, we're taking a concept and we're looking at specific conditions, and now we're upping the ante right now with your question, and it's really making the question about what do we do with the system. See, that is the biggest issue for us now in this movement is, yeah, an individual doctor wants to do something, but he exists or she exists in a network of defined insurance reimbursement and healthcare regulations that either encourage or discourage this particular integrative philosophy. And I think that's where policies start to become important. It's just like managing food in the Farm Bill. You know, it's the same thing. And it takes what does it take? Well, what it's taken to make this movement what it is today is consumer demand. Believe it or not, you know, this change in medical school education did not come from the doctors. It came from the people who decided they wanted a different, more whole person, holistic kind of healthcare. And all of them seeking people who can provide all these services. And then doctors going, you know, a third of the population is looking for this, so we better get on board and, you know, be aware of what's out there. And then so on and so forth.
You mentioned childhood trauma, and I was wondering if there's what kind of effects childhood trauma and stress can have on a person as they get older, like how they deal with stress and how they.
Yeah, I guess the question is, what is the effect of childhood trauma on an individual? It's the effects are individual. You know, at one extreme, a person is subconsciously very panicked or and has some of the most extreme manifestations of the things we talked about. On the other hand, there are some people who just get through it and it's an experience they remember, but they don't carry it through to their future. So I guess what I would say is it has the potential to be a very impactful event in some individuals to the point that they actually have to see someone to help them manage it, and for others, nothing. You know, they have a bad experience, but it's not dominating their lifestyle at the time as an adult.
I have two questions. Do you see a connection between SuperStress and Alzheimer's? And also, in that, if you do, how, from a perspective of integrative medicine, how would you see or deal with decreasing, maybe, or helping?
Okay, the question is, what is the impact of superstress on Alzheimer's? So first you have to drill down and say, what is Alzheimer's? And Alzheimer's is really a protein in the brain, and with the brain has a lot of fat around it, that accelerates inflammation and creates dysfunctional communication in the nervous system. And one of the things that influences it is inflammation. So if remember we talked about stress and how we up the ante with the stress molecules. That's how it accelerates it. What can we do to work with that and not have that expressed? Well, we want to go to the doctor. We want to get on the medication we want to diagnose it at an early time. We want to have a healthy diet that distracts the body from producing inflammation. And we want to attend to any emotional habits, the coping styles that add to the inflammation tendency.
One question about the slide you had on gender, and women were expressing more stress. But then it made me think, well, women are more expressive. And what about all the men who bottle up, who don't admit to having stress? Isn't that an indicator that they have worse stress than women? Or are you
Well, that report was based on a self-reporting questionnaire. So, sure. it could be that men have stress too. Actually, men do have stress. The problem with men is that they have testosterone, which dull their sense. It's not a problem really. It's actually an evolutionary doctrine. But the awareness of a stress response is less prominent in a male, and so they will tend to tough it out, and and our culture doesn't value having them get to the doctors. Actually, what drives men to doctors is usually their mates. So I think that that's a silent pandemic.
But the testosterone masks a sense of stress?
Yes. Because how do people know they're stressed? Cognitive awareness or a physical manifestation or a symptom. And most of the time it's cognitive awareness, feeling out of control, or menopause, or back pain, or whatever. So a male might not have that emotional connection, but would have the back pain, but then would see their doctor, and the doctor would hand the medicine for the back pain, but not put two and two together because they only have a 5-minute visit, that there's stress involved in it. So that's sort of the long-winded chain of how that happens, and I think the way to reverse it is just to get the word out, about how this can be sort of a two-headed beast of physical or emotional ailments, and sometimes you can have physical ailments, but not the emotional awareness of it. Sure.
2 questions. One of them, there was a slide about the 5 types of stress.
Mm-hmm.
I was wondering if you could just maybe flick to that and explain it a little bit further.
Okay. Well, what I was basically doing was archetyping how people have coping and resilient styles to help people kind of tune into, hey, that's me and I'm stressed, and then later on in the book, hey, that's me and I'm this type, and now what? So a person who's burned out is sort of at the end of the spectrum of stress damage. They can't manage any energy to get anything done. They're just like flat out. Essentially they're adrenally exhausted. And so, some of the fix, if you will, is first awareness, changing lifestyle, but adding as many things, be it more alternative therapies or more nutritive therapies, depending on where they are, in fortifying that which is depleted. Okay? And then, as a physician, my job is to make sure there's no disease that actually is added to it, like low thyroid hormone. So that's burnout. Overwhelm is someone who's kind of like frozen in the headlights of the panic, like a deer. They are overloaded and immobilized by their overload. And what is that? It's sort of the end stage product of a multitasking kind of a situation. And what is the fix there? Well, it's a nervous system that's run amok, that's sort of fragmented, and anything that can bring rhythm back to the nervous system. Regular sleep patterns, dietary, regular meals, less stimulation, like stimulants like coffee or whatever, 5-hour energy. Enhancing their skill in relaxation response to tonify or pacify that sort of jagged nervous condition. So breath exercises, massages, less ambient sounds like fire engines and things like that. Okay. Let's see. Emotionally sensitive. That's basically a coping skill in which someone's overwhelmed and they're just driven to tears or to down mood, and I guess the fix there is really, again, synchronizing everything you can with sleep, having a nurturing diet, maybe therapy, talk therapy, some way of decompressing and reframing perceptions, journaling, and if needed, medication, if it's really out of control. Controlling focus Usually that's an individual who's hyper focused on a goal at the expense of everything else. You know, they're not seeing their friends, they're not eating, they're like target goal. But they don't.
That's pretty much everyone in this room.
Yeah, but I mean, you have to remember that it's sure you have your goals, but remember this cardinal signs of the SuperStress: overwhelm, lack of joy. Anxious is the new normal. Life feels out of control. You can be goal-oriented and hyper-focused and still be healthy and non-stressed, or acutely stressed and not. The ravages in the body haven't gotten to the point where you're really not able to come back from it, or not. Explosive is kind of like a no-brainer. I mean, we've seen all sorts of examples of that. People with ill tempers taking it out on others. And what is the fix of that? Well, heightened awareness in that person of understanding what's happening to them first, and then understanding what are the triggers that drive the excessive behaviors, and so on and so forth.
I have a question about when it comes to sort of chronic pain, and that's an inflammatory kind of situation. If you get it sort of under control and calm down, but are you then still more prone? How can you really truly recover? I guess.
You mean from chronic?
From like I've had a lot of problems with my elbows from chronic use of the computer. I've had 2 surgeries. Blah blah blah. Acupuncture. I've tried it all, everything, and I'm now at a point where I can sort of know how far I can push my body, and then I have to stop. But it just feels like it's primed to just sort of get flamed up. It's like it just knows that it's being pushed.
Well, chronic pain is a very specific animal. I mean, once you get into the realm of a chronic,
right,
specifically in pain, there are new neurological pathways that are generated. So part of what your pain specialist is doing is using medications or any like acupuncture to reverse the trend. But then you're right. There's the habits and the line in the sand that your body draws to how far you can go before it comes back. And I think you have to pay attention.
You just have to pay attention.
It's just common sense. I mean, it's just, you stretch an elastic rubber
I know, but I
band
want to
so
go
many
back to the
times
way
and
I
it
was.
just snaps. Well, we're getting to the point now where we're starting to understand what some of the dietary things we can do to bring back some of that strength. And it has to do with preserving your gut health, maximizing absorption of a variety of vitamins, taking a vacation because that's when the restorative processes are maximized in the body, sleeping well, and so on and so forth.
Okay, I just thought that was. Thank you. You confirmed everything that I knew.
Anything else? Any other questions?
I kind of have just an interesting question. I've been dealing with one of my family members who's been kind of in the super stress realm for probably half of her life, I would have to say. And she's experienced a lot of trauma, and I find it very difficult at times to feel like I'm helping or how I can help this situation. Do you have any thoughts on that specifically?
Well, I think, once you're dealing with another individual, you have to honor their choice. I mean, you can always make suggestions, but you can't force people to do things. I think it's probably one of the most frustrating things about having family members. However, that having been said, there's nothing more powerful than modeling yourself.
It's interesting.
And that is one of the biggest teaching events that we spend in integrative medicine, explaining to our doctors. We teach them how to take care of themselves because we believe that our living example of our well-being is a powerful statement to our patients. And it really is, you know. So your life lived well, and you're being with the person in some way is probably the most significant transformative thing that you can do that's nonverbal.
Yes, I have a question regarding stress and emotional eating, and what's the trigger between both, and if there are like any other alternatives.
Well, that is such a complicated subject, stress and eating, right? That's like a whole other science. However, you know, there's the cultural component of what food is to people, and then there's the statistics of what the American Psychological Association tells us that we already know, that when people are stressed, they reach for salt and fat and sugar. And why? The sugar and the fat are very powerful in influencing the places that feel satisfied in the brain, which is sort of like a medication, you know, to the brain, inadvertently. And I think reversing that is first learning about what are the unique patterns to that individual, and working with a system that retrains the coping style, and then substituting the ill habits with habits that can also bring pleasure. You know, because you've got to have a happy brain, you've got to have a happy emotion, or you're just going to go back to that thing that really helped you, which was the sugary bar or the French fries or whatever, the wine. I mean, I could go on and on. So, and then there's biology. You know, some people just acquire more weight. Usually weight's the tip off that things are running amok.
Thank you.
Well, thank you. We kept you pestered.
Is it? Okay.
But what you mentioned biodots.
Oh, the biodots.
Yes.
Yes. So I'll leave you with this. I'll put this on your wrists and your hands.
Come on,
They're not so old.
I'm wondering though, in the case of something like a biodot, is there a feedback loop based on the information about being stressed that could actually be a reinforcing feedback loop where you see that you're stressed, so you get more stressed, and you see that you're stressed,
If
and you
you're a
get more.
perfectionist, yes.
Yes.
Yeah, but I mean, the more perfect, you know, if the dot is black and you're getting freaked out that the dot is black, the color theoretically is, it's going to turn dark blue if you're more relaxed. Yeah. And it'll stay getting this sort of dark color. I'm hoping these are not so old. So they're really stressful.
So do you take patients? Yeah, I
Yes.
You and me.
Yeah, we already talked about that.
Stress.
If you can breathe on it, it does it more than